The topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working on Purpose program, which has been brought to you with passion and pride since February of 2015 already. Thanks for tuning in this week. Great to have you. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. Most leaders are sitting on untapped human energy. I help them unlock it. I'm an organizational psychologist, logotherapist, workforce advisor, and the founder of the Gusto Now movement. But the title I live by is much simpler. The everyday title is I Traffic in Energy. Not surface level motivation or another engagement initiative, the deeper force, what I call gusto, the life force of performance that drives commitment, perseverance, and genuine ownership of a shared mission in the clients we serve. You can learn more about how we can work together at gusto-now.com or visit my personal site, elisecortez.com. Getting into today's program, we have with us back for a second time, Norman Wolfe. He's the founder and CEO of Quantum Leaders and the creator of the Living Organization, which is a framework that replaces machine thinking with a leadership model grounded in how organizations actually work. He is a former Hewlett-Packard executive who led a $1.2 billion turnaround and has spent over 4 decades helping CEOs close the gap between strategy and execution by aligning what people do, how they relate, and what they believe with the organization's goals. He's the author of a soon-to-be-released book he co-authored with his wife, Jane, called Living the Living Organization. Transform how you lead to deliver extraordinary results, which we'll be talking about today. He joins us today from Vancouver, Washington, just north of Portland, Oregon. Norman, a hearty welcome back to Working on Purpose.
Hey, thank you, Elise.
So great to have you. And as I mentioned, friend, I just really, really enjoyed the book. I thought it was so well written, so engaging, and it's so personable. And I really love that you wrote it into a parable.
Yes.
I'm seeing that more and more in terms of business books because we love stories. We're wired for stories and we can relate to them. So let's introduce, the main characters. Catherine is the CEO of Sharp Training Solutions, and this is a training organization that was really in the process of moving from doing training in person to doing online training. So that's kind of the gist. You want to fill in a little bit more about what was going on there?
Sure. So Catherine is, you might call, a reluctant CEO.
Right.
She, her dad had started the company and ended up having a heart attack. And the doctor said, you're stressed out, you need to retire. And Catherine took over. And interestingly enough, she took over about, I think it was 6 months just prior to when COVID hit. So while they had these plans to go online, eventually, now they had to pivot really quickly. And it presented a lot of tensions and stress in the organizations that challenged Catherine's leadership style, leadership approach. How do you get a team of people to execute much quicker than they were doing? So that's sort of the context, if you will.
So it opens with a particularly vexing conflict between two people. I think I want to call it's Charlie and Jason. So yes. She's really grappling with this, how they're really blaming each other for not producing results, and just lots and lots of tension. And somewhere in there, she gets introduced to this wonderful person named Merlin.
Yes, yeah, Merlin has a lot of meaning to Jane and I. But Merlin is the consultant that comes in. Merlin has been trained in the Living Organization framework by its founder, me, and Merlin comes in and works his magic on working with Jason and Charlie to have them see each other through a different light. That's sort of the bottom line of how the first part of it goes. And in that process, Catherine is observing how Merlin so deftly manages these conflicts and moves from conflict to cooperation and breaks down the silo. And then, of course, there's a few other issues that come up with the person in charge of, I think it's customer support and other small tensions that
Charlotte.
come up that Catherine says, let's go to have lunch with Merlin and see what he has to say. And so Merlin walks through again a way of thinking about the challenge. Most of our challenges are we get stuck in them because we have a certain way of thinking about it. And when we look at something through a certain lens and we feel stuck, oftentimes what's really necessary is what I call reframing, looking at it through a different lens. And all of a sudden you can see pathways to solutions that you can't see the other way. In a lot of the living organization, what I call reframing the paradigm, is based on we're stuck at seeing a business a certain way. And while we keep trying to fix it, we're still stuck in the way we see it. And that causes us to not be able to affect the solutions we want to see in organizations in general. And that's really what led me to write the book in the first place.
Yeah. So first, we want to contrast for our listeners and viewers who haven't yet read this book or the previous one that I had you on some years ago as well, talking about. You have a very strong foundational concept in distinguishing between an organization as a machine versus a living organization. If you want to say a little bit more about that.
Sure. If you think about, just step back from most of the rhetoric we hear about leadership and management in organizations. The foundational framework is that an organization is a black box that's supposed to take inputs and produces outputs. And it's that type of simple framing of what an organization is that most of our leadership theories and practices are based on. And under that, the designer of that machine, that black box, is the leader or the leadership team. And that design we call strategy and business model and structure and processes. And then inside the black box, we want to optimize the flow from input to output. And everything inside is a component. Now, if you think about that, no matter what we say about people, their most important assets, the critical stakeholders, we recognize their importance, and we really do. But the thinking is, to get the work done, I need these component parts to perform a certain way. The way we structure job descriptions, the way it's almost like structuring a spec sheet for a new robot, and that's the way people feel. They experience it. No matter what we say in our words, the lived experience is, I'm just a component part. And we see it play out when new technology comes along, like AI. Everybody's concerned about being replaced. Well, it's because that's the way the paradigm we live in exists. So as I looked at why, the basic question that stimulated all this was 70% of strategies fail, 70% of people are disengaged. And with all the wisdom we have from your books and other people's books and academics and the bookshelf behind me, the question that really stimulated my journey was, why aren't we making a difference? Why are the same statistics happening decade after decade after decade? And that's when I concluded it's a paradigm. And so I asked the question, what's a different paradigm? And again, looking at the 30% that are successful, what do they talk about? How do they think? How do they relate to their organizations? And then, of course, my own experiences, I began to really see organizations as operating more like a person does than a machine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I began to go down that path. And it's that notion that a collective of people that come together for a common purpose actually give birth to a living entity that surrounds them. A little interesting side story. when I got married to Jane, which is going on 25 years ago now, one of the things I learned from my previous marriages was this notion that when two people come together in a relationship, they actually give birth to a third entity called
Mhm.
the marriage. The marriage itself, or the relationship itself, is a living entity.
Mhm.
And over the years, well, initially Jane and I called it our usness. But then we got to talking about it and we said we should give our relationship a name. And guess who our relationship name is? It's
Is it
Merle.
Merlin? Yeah. Okay.
And so these are the principles that I lived in terms of what makes me effective as a person, what makes relationships as effective. And I just kept extrapolating that into the framework.
hmm So that's such a solid foundation for us to stand on now. It'll help our listeners and viewers better understand why this works so well. And let's go back to Catherine. She really was a reluctant CEO, and yet, of course, as I was delighted in, we see her grow so much over the course of the book, which is a reason why you and I probably both do the work that we do, because it's I don't know a better drug than to be able to help facilitate the growth
Mm-hmm.
and transformation in another human being. I just don't know.
Yeah.
And so what's interesting is she steps into this role. She's got a very different leadership style than her father, who had, by all accounts, a much more command and control
Yes.
sort of approach to leading. And his employees became dependent on that. They wanted his direction, for them to tell him, move the chess piece over here and move it that far back, kind of thing. So what that does, which is really interesting and so important for us to present for our listeners and viewers, is just how important that creates a sense of dependency in the
Yes.
employees,
Yes.
a learned helplessness.
Yes.
So if you could speak a little bit of that, she was dealing with that too in the beginning, also with Jason and Charlie. She was dealing with that too.
Yes. So it's a very common, what I call the byproduct of the machine paradigm, right? The leader is the one that's supposed to figure out what needs to be done and more or less how to do it. And the other thing leaders are geared towards, this gets a little complex, but think of it like this. I'm in charge of sales, so I'm Jason, I'm in charge of sales. My focus is to optimize sales performance. I'm Charlie, and I'm supposed to optimize operational performance. And I've got certain criteria, such as quality,
Right.
that requires me to achieve my goals. And Jason has his goals, and yet qualities. So what you find in these kind of silo-oriented conflicts is one person saying, "Yeah, I understand, but," and the other one's going, "Well, I know we got to make sales, but," and what you got is this whole orientation. Guess who has to resolve it? The leader. And so now the leaders are pressured with trying to get the silos to work together. What Merlin comes in and does is helps Charlie see how Jason's goals complement his goals, and get Jason to see how Charlie's goals complement his goals. So all of a sudden now the two are working together, helping each other as if they had one goal, the success of the company. And see, in the mechanistic approach, the goal setting methodology, if you will, orients people. The bonus, they're rewarded, they're acknowledged for achieving the goals that their department is given.
Right.
And that inherently creates the silo. And you
Right.
can't break the silo unless you break the way you think about relationship. In the living organization framework, and what Merlin does, it brings Charlie and Jason together into a single goal, a joint goal, recognizing that they're interdependent. They're like an ecosystem. They rely on each other. And that's the shift that happens.
And it's beautiful. I also like that part of what you include here. Of course, what part of your framework includes this idea of drawing from improv, which you know I'm a fan of because I take improv, and I
Yes.
take it in part because of what you put forth in the book, because it helps me develop a greater ability to be present, to listen, to respond, to be creative. And so part of what that entails for your model is making the other person look good. So looking for
Yes.
what's good and right, and past the the obvious, which is, Norman, you didn't do your part. And that's why we're not where we're at, because you didn't do your part.
That's right.
So talk a little bit about this notion of making the other party look good in order to be able to create that stronger, unified one.
Well, if you look at, God, there's a little clip I use in my training that's by Herbie Mann talking about, God, I can't think of the musician's name now. No, Herbie Hancock talking about this famous trumpet player. His name's not coming to my mind. I apologize. And Herbie Mann's going, Miles Davis, that's what it is. And we're going about how playing one of Miles Davis' really grooves, and we're all in this groove, and I'm playing on the keyboard, and I hit the wrong chord, and I just go, ugh. But Miles just pauses for a second, and he takes my mistake and makes it right. Mm-hmm. Now, just imagine if we did that. That's the notion of improv. That's a wonderful example. Mm-hmm. And Miles didn't say, Herbie, what's the matter with you? That's not the right note. Right, you know the right note. Right. How come you're doing it all wrong? Instead, he just said, we're a collective, and we've all got to help each other make it work. Mm-hmm. So that's what Jason and Charlie does eventually, is they learn how to make it work. It doesn't matter who's got the problem. It's just a we problem. Mm-hmm. And that's the essence of make the other look good. And all improvisation, life, we can't predict what's going to happen. In the machine paradigm, we like predictability. Mm-hmm. So I got my goals, I got my plan, something comes along and interrupts it. That's the bad thing, the interruption.
Right.
The interruption is Charlie, then Jason's going to be really upset. He's going to keep pointing to Charlie because that's the interruption. But life isn't like that. Life is unpredictable. So improvisation allows me to, that's something new I didn't plan. How do we now work on that together to move forward? That's what Miles Davis did when Herbie Hancock made that terrible mistake. And it was just, Herbie Hancock says, it's like taking poison and turning it into wine.
Mm-hmm. Let's let our listeners and viewers reflect on that for just a second, because we're going to take our first break. So listeners and viewers, I want you to think about this notion of how that capacity to practice improv for making the other person look good fits and so works so beautifully in today's most uncertain times. Definitely uncertain today. I'm Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Norman Wolfe. He is the founder and CEO of Quantum Leader and the creator of the Living Organization, which is a framework that replaces machine thinking with a leadership model grounded in how organizations actually work. We've been diving into his brand new book that will be coming out in September of 2026. After the break, we'll continue on with part of his next toolkit in his framework. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I am your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, as I am dedicated to helping create a world where organizations thrive because their people thrive. They're led by inspirational leaders that help them find and contribute their greatness, and we find ways to do business that betters the world. I keep researching and writing my own books. So one of my latest came out. It's called The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business. And I wrote it to help leaders understand today's very discerning workforce. What do they want and need from you to give you their best and want to stick around? And then I provide you 22 best practices to equip you to provide it through your leadership and your culture. You can find my books on Amazon or my personal site, EliseCortez.com. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Norman Wolfe. He's the co-author with his wife, Jane, of the soon-to-be released book, Leading the Living Organization, Transform How You Lead to Deliver Extraordinary Results. So what I would love to do next for our listeners and viewers, as we talk here, Norman, I just want to give them little snippets of some of the tools that you provide in the book. And I really like your ARC framework. Can you talk to us about the ARC framework?
The ARC stands for activity, relationship, and context. And the way it came about is as I was mulling over this notion of shifting the paradigm to thinking of an organization, a person, the natural next question is, how does a person create the outcomes they desire? And so this now becomes a combination of years and years of study into multiple fields of human endeavor. So it came down to, for me, three things. One was I have to do stuff, right? If I want to build a bookcase, I plan out the bookcase. I go buy the wood. I cut the wood. I assemble it, stain it. And you do stuff, right? In business, we make our plans, we organize, we structure, we set goals. We have, what I call the field of activity. In the machine paradigm, that's enough. That's what you worry about. And you worry about optimizing the activity, if you will, make it as efficient as possible. But humans' activity field, if you think about it, and you think about it sort of like energetic, the quality of the relationships I'm in has a huge impact on whether my energy goes up or goes down. Mm-hmm. And what you have to do is think about having a significant disagreement with your kids or your wife, or your dog is at the vet, or any relationship issue in your life. And your focus, your energy is going to be drained. It's going to come down. Mm-hmm. If you're in an environment that's got lots of conflict or resistance, anything that blocks your energy or consumes your energy, your activity goes down. Go the other way, and you have an environment where you're appreciated, supported, you feel safe. We talk about psychological safety. Mm-hmm. Your energy goes up, so your activity goes up, right? It's just a very simple formula. So activity and relationship. The third part of it, and this is an attribute that makes living people, a living organization, as I like to call it, different than a living system. Mm-hmm. In that humans have this desire to understand the experiences we have. We want to give it meaning, primarily so we create behaviors that we feel will make us safe or successful, or both, ideally. And over time, we collect those, what I call narrative stories or meaning-making stories and associated behaviors. They sort of connect to each other like pairs. Mm-hmm. And I looked at it like it's like a psychic DNA. We have our genetic DNA, our physiological DNA, but we also have sort of a psychic DNA. And I call that our context. So we got activity, relationship, and context. And the interesting thing is, if you think about trying to achieve a goal, an outcome, we optimize our lives to behave in ways, let me put it this way, respond to life events that gives us a high probability of getting what we want. And that instruction set of how to do that set of psychic DNA is what is the context. So if you think about, I'm optimized my behavior for outcome A, and now I want to start doing outcome B. I have to change my behaviors, which is both activity and relationship. But to do that, I have to change my context. So context is really the driving force in how we end up creating our outcomes. That's a very engineering way of talking about a lot of psychological principles, if you will, which I'm sure you can read into it all. But that's really what's going on. So when I looked at organizations, I said, do organizations have relationships? Well, we know they do. silos effects, for example, is conflict in relationship between two living people, right? Charlie isn't, it's not just Charlie and Jason, it's the sales organization and the operational organization. They have their certain persona,
Mhm.
and they interact with each other at levels other than Charlie and Jason.
Right.
Charlie and Jason, or the VP of any department, is just sort of the voice of that person, that collective person.
Mhm.
So certainly there's relationship dynamics, but organizations also develop the context, and we call that, how we do things around here, or culture.
Right.
The culture is actually evolves out of the collective psychic DNA, the psychic context. So those are the three key framing to help leaders understand what's really driving results. If we just focus on the activity as the machine paradigm instructs us to do, we keep trying to push the levers and change the KPIs and reorganize ourselves and optimize that activity, but we're not paying attention to the relationship dynamics in a way that makes it effective, and we're not paying attention to the context. And when we do, in a lot of the books that you and I often talk about, um, it gets implemented through a very mechanistic approach, which undermines the very essence of what the things we're being taught do. That's why I finally realized Buckminster Fuller once said, don't try to fix the problems in the old paradigm,
Mhm.
create a new one and let the old one die.
Yeah.
That's what I finally decided we had to do. We have
Mhm.
to shift the paradigm itself.
Mhm.
See through a new lens, if you will, see the world differently. And that opens up a whole lot of different. And that's what Catherine goes through in the second part of the book. And after watching Merlin weave his magic, she says, I want to learn how to do that.
Yeah, yeah, she does it beautifully. And to illustrate this, one of the things I wanted to talk about was, Charlotte's challenge. She's the customer. She's heading up customer service, and now she's come to Merlin through Catherine because her problem is her whole team is demoralized because they feel like this new approach to the training, which has been an adaptation to what they were doing in the with live physical training and moving it into the online format, they had to find a way to make that stick. And in so doing, there were problems in how some of that stuff. A lot of the users had questions and such, and so Charlotte's team is like feeling overwhelmed with the number of questions they're fielding, with the kinds of questions they're fielding, and they feel like they've been dumped on.
Yeah.
So now she gets the opportunity to be able to create this whole contextual reframe that you're talking
Yes.
about.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what that looked like, what she was dealing with before Merlin came in to help her, and how she was helped to see, because this is smack on our world, Norman. This whole reframe context stuff is how we also help activate meaning in organizations.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, as you said, Charlotte has this certain orientation. So as these customer support organization evolved over the years, they formed what was a set of beliefs, a context of how we should behave, how we should respond. And it's designed to make things work better. In the past, when you had in-person training, a lot of the issues that clients would have would get solved or talked to the in-person trainer.
Mhm.
Now they're doing online training, and now all those questions are coming into Charlotte's organization. And like you
Mhm.
said, they all feel overwhelmed. But they're overwhelmed because they're looking at the way they view their job through a different set of responsibilities and a different lens of what's important. So I believe, if I remember correctly, Merlin suggests that Charlotte reframe the whole purpose of why this department exists from just handling support issues to, I think it's something along the line of, we're here to create better leaders,
Yeah, we're here to create great leaders.
great leaders.
Big difference between we're here to solve problems and support people.
That's right. Very different. So on one hand, it's all we're here to do is support people. On the other hand, we're here to create great leaders. And so they did put in place all of the skill training that these people needed, but they saw that as an addition to, not a core purpose of the job. So making that reframing changed everything.
And then you added the scaffolding to help hold it up, right? To
Yes,
sustain
yes.
that new, which is where we're celebrating what the customer service reps are doing to solve these problems, and how they're really highlighting how these customers are using the training to be able to impact the change in their organization. So that scaffolding is really important too.
Yeah, and scaffolding comes in two styles. One is what I call physical or structural scaffolding, but the other part of it is ritual.
Yeah.
These minor gatherings with an intention to celebrate successes and to give new meaning to the words we're living. Putting words on the wall saying we're here to make great leaders is not going to really. It'll be an aha moment for brief, but to sustain it, you have to give it structure and support. And so ritual becomes a part of that scaffolding.
Mm-hmm. So from our vantage point, to support that scaffolding would be we help develop managers who manage through meaning. And they're holding up that foundational floor so that people can stand on that, to be able to celebrate, to have a space and a psychological safety to celebrate that.
That's right.
And then to be rewarded for living the purpose of the organization through those behaviors and those actions. And that is so, so important. That way the whole team hangs together, or the whole organization hangs together as one, unified by kind of a common heartbeat and something that's important to all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you set a context like that, and if you even think about what Jason and Charlie ended up creating, they reframed the context of what the relationship was all about.
Yes.
When you reframe the context, you're creating a new container.
Yes.
And within that new container, people are free to operate knowing they're going to be successful. And so resetting the context is really a critical skill. And I know a lot of the work you do is on purpose, is all centered around that very element.
It is. So let's grab our last break while we let our listeners and viewers let that idea sink in of how they can start to reframe context in their organization and their teams. We got on the air with Norman Wolfe. He is the co-founder of Quantum Leaders and the creator of the Living Organization, which is a framework that replaces machine thinking with a leadership model grounded in how organizations actually work. We've been diving into some of the principles that he and his wife Jane have put into this beautiful book. After the break, we will continue giving you a few more of those pearls. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. I mentioned my last book came out, The Great Revitalization. What I did for you is I created a very simple assessment that you can pull off my website, gusto-now.com, and you can go through the 3 pages and fill out to what extent your organization is actually meeting the needs of today's discerning standards among the workforce. Very, very revealing. If you are just now joining us, my guest is Norman Wolfe. He is the co-author with his wife Jane of the soon-to-be-released book, Leading the Living Organization, Transform How You Lead to Deliver Extraordinary Results. So we have to at least also help our listeners and viewers understand the 6 core skills of the living organization. Let's do that next.
Well, the 6 core skills started with two things. 2 things happened. One was when you're dealing with people, communications is obviously one of the most critical skills you have.
Yeah.
But there's communication and there's communication, right?
Right.
And in the second challenge, we talked about uncertainty and how improv helps with that, and complexity and ambiguity, and the VUCA world that we've all been talking about now for over a decade. So I began to ask the question: what skills do leaders need to navigate the world if they're going to navigate it through the lens of a living organization, that we're dealing with a living person? And one of the absolute most foundational skill is we have to, when we're dealing with people, connection is important. When we're dealing with uncertainty, insight and intuition is important. So how can we learn how to do more than wait for that aha moment in the shower? How can we take a challenge and look at it through a different lens that facilitates that aha moment that we've all experienced? And in my world, in my life experiences, I've learned some skills, meditation and other skills. But there's one process I learned called heart centering.
Mm-hmm.
And what I discovered is when I go into that state within myself, one, I have more patience with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Two, my own defense mechanism drops and I can listen to other people from where they're coming from. I can share who I am as I am without the need to defend myself. I also find that that's the sort of the gateway into intuition, inspiration, insight,
Mm-hmm.
wisdom.
Right. Yep.
I just gain this different set of information to help me with complex decisions. I learned that through a very ritualistic or spiritual process, not spiritual in the religious sense, but sort of a training in deep work. Part of it was, I call it psycho-spiritual, because part of it was ritual and part of it was psychological. A lot of Jungian models used. But I knew I couldn't take leaders on a 12-day retreat where there was fasting and silence to teach them how to open the heart center, right? To be able to access that capability. I was giving a talk one day, and I just decided to do an experiment. I said, everybody has an experience of being loved.
Mm-hmm.
And that feeling when I'm in that heart center is that feeling I have when I'm loved. So I ran a little experiment just asking people to close their eyes, bring back a moment when, and then look at the challenge they're facing from that problem. And the responses are phenomenal in 8 minutes. 8 minutes. So I said, okay, I think I know how to help leaders at least begin to experience what it's like, and give them the sense they can do that. So we have a training on heart centering. With that as the foundation, you now have heart-centered communication,
Yeah.
which allows you to have that connected communication, not just factual communication. And if you want to know what that's like, if anybody in your audience knows about active listening, which has been around for decades, think about active listening, that same process, but done from being in the heart center, where you have compassion and empathy for yourself and the other you're talking to. So those are the first two skills. The third is this whole notion of reframing context,
Yeah.
which requires that heart-centered communication, so you can be with the other person in a way that you understand their narrative. If you look what Merlin does throughout a lot of the book, he's really teaching that place to open up to understand the other person's context
Mm-hmm.
and relate to it, and then begin to share context to context. So reframing context requires those first two skills. And of course, in that is the skill of storytelling and ritual, which is part of that scaffolding that we talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Then we move into improv mindset, when we talked about why that's important.
Right.
Balancing opposites, because we deal in an ambiguous world. And I actually learned this from Barry Johnson's work on polarity thinking, where he was able to show how opposites, if viewed correctly, become complements,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they balance each other. And so I call it balancing opposites. And then the other skill really boils around the ability to coach people.
Yeah.
A lot of the work a lot of the leaders' role in the future is taking on a developmental orientation,
Absolutely.
right? And so, how do people learn? What gets in the way of growing? How do you put growth into a time-based game? And if I think about developing my kids, if it takes 2 years, if it takes 3 years, 5 years, it's okay as long as they get there. But in business, we got this dimension called time. We don't know, the marketplace may not allow us to have 5 years to grow.
Right.
So how do you understand the developmental process for people in a time-based environment, which is a very important thing for leaders, and then the coaching skills necessary to have those conversations. So those are the 6 skills: the heart centering, heart-centered communication, reframing context, improv mindset, balancing opposites, and then developing people.
Who just do those? That's all you need to do. Just do those. All good.
That's why I had to write a whole book on just that topic.
Right. And then we'll see you after lunch. It's all good.
Yeah.
So good, Norman. Just so good. I just, like I said, there was so much alignment with, of course, what we do as well here. And so I do want to talk about this idea of the coachultant that you talk about. But before we do that, I really would be remiss if we didn't also talk about this idea of emotions as frequencies. And of course, I have also read David Hawkins' work, which you referenced in the book as part of how this comes from for you. I think this is a really great idea to help listeners and viewers understand just how potent emotions are. So if you could say a little bit about this idea of emotions as frequencies and why that's important for the organization.
As you said, there's a lot of people have been working on this. I think the first person I read it from was David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force.
Mine too, yeah.
Yeah. So the way I understood this work was to relate it personally and what does it feel like in the body when I am upset versus when I am anxious versus when I am calm versus when I am joyful. The body feels differently, and we give those feeling tones a name, a label. Right? Well, those feeling tones are really body vibrating at a frequency. And so when we are feeling anxious, and this again comes from other people's work, feeling anxious, defensive, scared, fearful, body shuts down. We're vibrating at a very low frequency. And in that frequency, we have very limited capacity to see anything other than defensiveness.
Right.
When we're in the upper quadrant, so to speak, when we're into in appreciation, peace, calm, joy, love, bliss, the body's in a whole different state, much more open and receptive. It also plays out in relationships, right? Because, well, a simple thing. You ever walk in and sense that something's wrong with a friend or your spouse or a child, and you go, "What's the matter, honey?" And they go, "Nothing, it's fine."
Right.
And you know there's no truth in that statement.
Right.
If I just followed the words, if I followed active listening, I would say, "Oh, I hear you're fine, thank you." But I don't. There's something inside of me. I'm literally like an antenna picking up the frequency of what they're transmitting. I'm also an antenna transmitting a frequency when I speak, right? So I can get up there and say all the words I want about whatever it is and how great we're doing, but the audience is actually picking up my frequency. Right? We call it I like to say, it's not the words or the lyrics of the song that we remember, it's the music. And so there you go. That's the notion behind it.
It's powerful, which then situates us beautifully. So that, for listeners and viewers, the capacity to be able to read that as a leader is often called attunement, right? So your capacity to be able to tune into those around you, to catch that vibrancy gauge versus just listening to the words they say is really a critical skill.
You've also heard if I jump in, you've also heard the notion of setting the tone at the top.
Right.
Well, people don't think about that from a frequency, an energy frequency point of view, but that's really what it is. We are constantly setting the tone. Mostly we're doing it unconsciously.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And we want you to be more conscious about that, right?
We want you to be
we want you to be conscious about that. So we just have like maybe a couple of minutes here, but I would love for you just to introduce this idea of redefining leadership through the coach-ultant lens. So just say a little bit about that, if you would kind of cue it up for the listeners and viewers before they read the book.
I came about that in my own career because I was always caught between two worlds. One is the consultant's world. The consultant's world is somebody who comes in and gives people the advice they need to get things done. The other world I'm in is a coach's world, right? Because my goal is to help people be able to do it on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Well, I saw a parallel in that between a leader's role in today's world. Most leaders view their job as being the one to help people be successful. And for me to do that, I have to tell them what to do.
Mm-hmm.
When they're stuck, I got to help them through it. And that's a consultant's role. When you're stuck, I'm going to come in and help you. That's what you're going to pay me for.
Mm-hmm.
But doing that prevents any development. So I keep them stuck and dependent on me. We talked about dependency at the very beginning.
Yes.
So to do that, you want to be able to coach. The challenge is you got to know when to do which role to take on at what point in time and what does it. So a leader's role is really one of a coach and a consultant, coach-sultant.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the balancing we try to teach in our coaching modules.
Mm-hmm. So good, Norman. I really, of course, I've been a fan of yours, and you and I've been friends for several years now. And I really can't wait for this book to come out and get into the hands of more listeners and viewers who need this kind of instruction. And you made it easy for us to learn through your book. You probably might remember the shows listened to by people around the world who will tune in because they want to become a better version of themselves as a human, and they want to become a better version as a leader. What would you like to leave them with?
Oh, I would say, first of all, accept the fact that you're stuck in a paradigm trap.
Mm.
And I want to acknowledge, first and foremost, shifting the paradigm is not an intellectual game. People will understand what I write. They'll understand it intellectually. But it's very difficult to shift one's paradigm. And for this reason, the belief system, the framework we have, the context field, the psychic DNA that we've developed was designed to make us successful. It's what got us here.
Mm-hmm.
It's very difficult to abandon that.
Yeah.
Second thing I would leave them is learn how to heart center. Because as I said earlier, heart centering gives you the ability to not only deal with things around you, but things within you. Yeah. You can see that shift and you can feel the sadness of some part of you going away and the fear of going in a new direction and stepping into it anyway. So paradigm shift, heart center.
Sounds good to me, Norman. I really appreciate you writing this second book in the trilogy. You have one more to go, no pressure.
One more to go.
And then we'll come back and talk about that as well. Okay, listeners and viewers, you're going to want to learn more about Norman Wolfe, the work that he and his team do at Quantum Leaders, and the second book that he and Jane have written, Leading the Living Organization. You can start by visiting their website. It is thelivingorganization.com. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on air with Steve Brown, a leading voice in the conversation on artificial intelligence. He is a former executive at Google DeepMind and Intel, and he has delivered hundreds of engaging, information-rich keynotes across the continents, inspiring audiences to take action with AI. We talked about his latest book, The AI Ultimatum, Preparing for a World of Intelligent Machines and Radical Transformation. Incredibly eye-opening. I highly encourage you all to grab that episode. You need to hear what this man has to say. Next week, we'll be on the air with Beth Warner. She's the founder of Mother Cover, a leave coverage agency that helps companies across the U.S. and Canada manage parental and temporary leave without disrupting business or careers. Fantastic new concept. So important to meet the needs of today's dynamic workforce. See you then, and let's continue leaning in, discovering how to elevate your operating system as a leader and create destination workplaces where legendary business takes place. Let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune into Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.